Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today to share something that we often overlook, something that's so critical for us to understand. And that's the concept of male weakness. Yes, I said it. Male weakness, not as an insult, but as an insight into the depths of what a man goes through. Men, despite how they may appear on the outside, often experience emotional vulnerability in ways that are not widely recognized. Society has for a long time expected men to be strong, stoic, and in control. But the truth is, many men carry emotional baggage just as much as anyone else. The difference is that men have, for various reasons, been conditioned not to express their emotions openly. The expectation to be emotionally invulnerable can often lead to internalized struggles that go unnoticed. Men, for the most part, have been raised with the notion that to show vulnerability is to show weakness. And this idea is ingrained deeply into their psyche. They've learned, sometimes from a very young age, that crying is something only women do. That crying is something only women do. That expressing fear or insecurity is something to be ashamed of. And that to be a man means to suppress their feelings and soldier on. In many ways, this cultural conditioning has made men more emotionally isolated, even within their closest relationships. The emotional vulnerability that every human experiences is something men often struggle to express. It's not that men don't feel deeply, it's that they have learned, whether consciously or unconsciously, to hide those feelings. In the pursuit of appearing strong and self-reliant, they internalize their emotions, often resulting in a kind of emotional suppression that can have negative consequences for their mental and emotional health. There's a certain vulnerability that men face in their daily lives, especially in their relationships. They are expected to be the providers, the protectors, the ones who take charge in difficult situations. They are expected to be emotionally strong and unshaken in times of crisis. Yet, when men are struggling with their own emotions, whether it's anxiety, sadness, fear, or stress, they often don't know how to share that with others. Society tells them that to ask for help or show emotion is a form of weakness. And so many men bottle up their feelings, try to navigate their struggles alone. This emotional vulnerability hidden beneath the surface can lead to men feeling disconnected from others, even from those they love the most. It's not unusual for a man to struggle with feelings of loneliness or isolation, even when surrounded by people. They may have trouble reaching out for support because of the fear that doing so will make them appear weak or inadequate. And so they keep their feelings to themselves, believing that if they ask for help, they will be judged or seen as less capable. For many men, their vulnerability is masked by their need to maintain control. The idea of being in control is central to how men are socialized to view themselves. From a young age, boys are often taught that real men don't show emotion. They control their emotions. They are taught to man up when facing difficult situations and to avoid showing any signs of weakness. This can create a conflict within them when they are faced with emotions that they feel they shouldn't have. They may feel shame or embarrassment at their inability to control their feelings, leading them to hide or suppress them even further. What's often overlooked is that this suppression of emotion doesn't make men stronger. In fact, it can have the opposite effect. Suppressed emotions can manifest in unhealthy ways, whether in the form of anger, frustration, or emotional withdrawal. A man who has been taught to suppress his feelings may struggle to communicate in a relationship, may feel distant from his partner, or may become overwhelmed by emotions he doesn't know how to handle. Instead of reaching out for support, he may isolate himself, not because he wants to, but because he doesn't know how to ask for help. Another important aspect of male emotional vulnerability is the expectation to be invulnerable in the face of hardship. Men are often conditioned to believe that they must always be strong, no matter the situation. If they are going through a tough time, whether it's a personal loss, a professional setback, or an emotional struggle, there's an expectation that they will simply cope with it without letting it affect their outward demeanor. When men do show their vulnerability, especially in moments of crisis, it can feel like a violation of this unspoken rule of masculinity. They may feel conflicted, wondering whether they should allow themselves to be vulnerable or whether they should continue the facade of strength, even if it means carrying that burden alone. This emotional vulnerability is not a weakness. It's a fundamental part of being human. But the social expectations placed on men often make it difficult for them to acknowledge and embrace this vulnerability. It's not that men don't feel, it's that they've been taught to suppress those feelings to avoid appearing weak. This emotional suppression can lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms, such as bottling up emotions until they erupt, or disengaging from relationships to avoid emotional exposure. The emotional struggles that many men face are real and they deserve to be acknowledged. Men are not robots. They are human beings who experience joy, sadness, fear, and pain just like anyone else. They need to be given the space to express these emotions without fear of judgment or ridicule. It's important for women, especially in relationships, to understand that the emotional vulnerability that men face is often hidden, and it may require patience and empathy to help them open up. When men are allowed to be vulnerable without fear of judgment, it creates the possibility for deeper emotional connections and more authentic relationships. In the end, emotional vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of humanity. And the sooner we can recognize and embrace this truth, the healthier and stronger our relationships will be. Men often carry an intense desire for respect and validation, both from themselves and from others, especially from the people they care about most. This need for respect is woven deeply into the fabric of male identity, yet it's an area where men frequently struggle and suffer in silence. There is a societal expectation that men should be able to perform and excel in various areas of life without needing affirmation, that they should be inherently confident and self-sufficient. However, the truth is, just like women, men also yearn for acknowledgement. This need is not rooted in vanity, but in a desire to feel valued and seen for who they are and what they contribute. The respect that men seek is often not simply about admiration or praise, but rather a deeper sense of recognition that they are doing something worthwhile, that their efforts matter. It's tied to a need for their contributions to be appreciated in both their personal and professional lives. In relationships, this need for respect can be particularly pronounced. Men want to feel respected by their partners, whether that's in terms of their intelligence, their work ethic, or their role within the relationship. When a man feels disrespected, whether through criticism, neglect, or a lack of appreciation, it can deeply affect his self-esteem. This does not necessarily mean that men seek constant praise, but they want to feel that their efforts and presence are valued. When they don't get that, It can feel as though they are invisible or that they are not enough. This unspoken yearning for respect is often masked by pride or a reluctance to express these feelings openly. A man might not always tell you that he needs to feel respected, but his actions and behaviors may suggest otherwise. He might withdraw or become distant, not out of anger, but because of hurt. The absence of respect can be incredibly painful for men, often leading to frustration and confusion within relationships. Men may also feel that their value is tied to their ability to provide or succeed in specific roles. And when that value is questioned, it can trigger insecurity. They are taught from a young age to equate respect with success, particularly in professional or societal contexts. When men are not given the respect they feel they deserve, especially when they are working hard or making significant efforts, it creates a sense of failure. This can become even more complicated if men are also struggling internally with insecurities or doubts about their worth. The fear of not being respected often becomes a silent source of anxiety. The desire to earn respect can drive men to push themselves harder, often to their own detriment, thinking that more work, more accomplishments, or more status will prove their worth. This can sometimes lead to burnout or disillusionment, especially when respect doesn't come in the form they expected. Similarly, the lack of validation can be crushing. While validation may seem like something superficial or unnecessary to some, it is a deeply ingrained need in all human beings. For men, this validation may manifest in different ways, such as acknowledgement of their efforts, recognition of their sacrifices, or simply hearing words of affirmation. Men often feel that they must be the strong ones who support everyone else. And while they may give that support willingly, it can also be emotionally draining. When they are not validated in their struggles, it can lead to feelings of isolation and frustration. There is an expectation that men should always be the ones to fix things, whether it's problems at home or in their work lives. When they don't receive the same encouragement, they can feel depleted and unnoticed. They may not ask for validation because they've been conditioned not to, but it doesn't mean they don't need it. Unfortunately, this need for respect and validation is often overlooked, misunderstood, or ignored by those around them. Men are frequently expected to be the rock, the dependable one, the one who can handle anything without needing support. This notion of invulnerability means that many men do not feel comfortable expressing their need for recognition, even to those closest to them. It can be particularly difficult for men to vocalize their insecurities or ask for the validation they require because they fear it will make them seem weak. This fear of appearing vulnerable or dependent can make men seem emotionally distant, when in reality, they may just be waiting for the kind of recognition that they so desperately need, but have never been taught to ask for. In many cases, the issue is compounded by a disconnect between the way men express their need for respect and the way women or society perceive that need. Men may show that they need respect, not through words, but through actions. They may work tirelessly, be overly protective, or take on a variety of responsibilities in an attempt to prove their worth. When these efforts go unnoticed, it can create an emotional gap. A man may become frustrated because he feels as though his contributions are not appreciated, but he doesn't know how to communicate that frustration effectively. He may end up shutting down emotionally, withdrawing from those who are closest to him, This emotional withdrawal is often misinterpreted as indifference, when in reality, it's a response to feeling unseen or unheard. Men's need for respect and validation is not a fleeting desire, but rather a fundamental part of their emotional and psychological makeup. It is deeply tied to their sense of identity and self-worth. When that respect is given freely, when validation is offered, it can inspire men to be the best version of themselves, to be more engaged, more connected, and more confident. But when that respect is withheld, it can have the opposite effect. It can lead to feelings of inadequacy and frustration, which can manifest in a range of emotional and behavioral issues. Therefore, understanding and acknowledging men's need for respect and validation is crucial in building stronger, more fulfilling relationships and fostering a sense of emotional well-being. One of the most profound emotional struggles that many men face, often silently, is the fear of rejection. It is something that cuts to the core of their emotional well-being, though it is frequently overlooked or misunderstood by those around them. Rejection for men does not just refer to the rejection they might experience in romantic relationships, but it extends far beyond that. Men fear being rejected in many aspects of their lives, whether it's in their professional endeavors, their friendships, or their roles as fathers or partners. The fear of not being good enough, of being turned away or dismissed, can create an overwhelming sense of anxiety that men may not readily express. They may carry this fear internally, attempting to mask it with outward displays of confidence, strength, or independence. But the reality is that this fear is pervasive and often debilitating. At its core, this fear stems from a deep-seated need for acceptance and validation. Men, just like anyone else, have an intrinsic desire to be accepted and valued by others. This can manifest in different ways through their career accomplishments, their relationships, or their role within a social group. But what many men may not openly admit is that this fear of rejection can sometimes prevent them from taking risks or pursuing opportunities, because the thought of being rejected feels like a personal attack on their identity. They may fear that if they fail or if they aren't accepted, it will somehow mean they aren't good enough or that they will not measure up to others' expectation. This fear is often deeply rooted in childhood experiences and societal conditioning, where men are taught that success and external validation are what define their worth. When they experience rejection, it can feel like a blow to their sense of self. For many men, this fear of rejection can play out in relationships where they may be afraid of not meeting their partner's needs, of not being loved in return, or of facing emotional abandonment. In romantic relationships, the fear of rejection can be particularly acute because men often equate love with validation. They want to feel that they are worthy of affection, respect, and attention. When this need is not met, or when they perceive their partner's actions or words as dismissive, it can trigger deep insecurities and a fear of being left behind. This can manifest in behaviors such as emotional withdrawal, overcompensation in other areas, or excessive neediness, all of which stem from a deep fear that they are not enough. Men may internalize these feelings, not wanting to appear vulnerable or weak, and instead struggle with their emotions in silence, allowing the fear of rejection to persist unchecked. This fear of rejection also plays